Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Joe for Saturday, April 24th, 2010.
Salute.
Joe, you were at the Hyman Minsky Conference last week at the Levy Economics Institute in New York City. There were a bunch of Fed chairmen there. Paul Krugman was there. First of all, tell us a little bit about Hyman Minsky. The little bit that I know about him is he was an American economist who taught at Harvard and Brown, I believe at Berkeley between about 1950 and 1990, and he's known for his financial instability hypothesis. Can you fill us in on Minsky and this hypothesis?
His overall focus was financial instability, and how the structure that we're operating under, inherent in that structure is the seeds of financial instability, and mainly it deals with, let's call it fractional reserve banking, but really, the idea that we create debt and we expand debt, in the euphoria of a market expansion, what we would call, the expansion part of the business cycle. But then, that the thing that takes over is from rationality to let's call it the exuberance part, Pete. Uh, that that there's a kind of a built-in greed-driven need to expand beyond what is rational, and therefore into a bubble. And from there, at a certain point, to realize that there's so much debt that's been created, so much expansion that's been created that it's not sustainable. And we start, and again, back with the fractional reserve system, the contraction of the economy and how that leads to debt deflation, and from debt deflation into the abyss, into the depths of unemployment and lost wages and all of that stuff. So his was a study of that, and his recommend. I would say that his big recommendations were to be aware of it, for the regulators to be willing to step in at the point that irrational exuberance starts to take off and do whatever they can do given the debt money system, which is primarily to raise interest rates, Pete, as ridiculous as that is. But that's but his philosophy was that if we understand that is the system that we're in, the nature of how people work and within the system, that we can better manage it to avoid the heights and the depths, to take financial instability. Okay. Now, Volcker, by the way, was there, and he made a comment, Pete, about the fact that, remember, he was thrust into the inflationary problems brought about externally by
In
the Arab oil embargo.
in the
Okay.
early 1980s.
Right,
Yeah.
and he made a comment that he called Minsky to ask him, hey, you're the guy who's been studying this. What should I do? And to say that Minsky didn't really have an answer. Okay, well, you could say partly it's because it was externally caused. It wasn't even part of the operation of our own economy. It was something where we were importing all that oil, and that drove costs up and caused inflation and high interest rates and everything. But anyway,
So,
uh,
so in short, Minsky was had a skilled diagnosis of the dysfunctional aspects of our monetary system. He was
right,
aware of the problems of what we call the debt money system, although I'm
right,
not sure he used that expression.
right.
But he never got so far along as to see monetary reform as we view it as the solution. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it was my dad. My dad did a lot of reading on Minsky, and he always said to me, he's probably further along than most economists. My dad said between what Keynes actually wrote, and what Minsky, was observing about what was going on, he said really they had everything there to go to the next step, which was, well, we need to eliminate debt money. So that, Pete, if you think about the economy coming down, right? Now, what is the economy coming down? That means that banks won't lend. That means that the nature of the system right now is that there are not creditworthy borrowers. Why not? Because there's so much debt out there and we can't afford to make the debt service payments. So my dad said, well, the logic there is the cause is debt money. the fact that we have to have debt in order to create money. And so we need to get away from that. So my dad, while he appreciated it, he always said, Minsky was another one of those guys who, didn't take it to the next step, was not willing to challenge, the idea that we need to create money as debt.
Well, let's quickly move on to the conference now. There were several Fed chairmen there. Honig was there, Bullard from St. Louis, Richard Fisher from Dallas, Sandy Pianalto from Cleveland, I saw on the speakers list.
Right.
What were they talking about? Were they talking about monetary reform?
Oh, not at all. The big thing to me about the Fed in a phrase, the Fed just don't get it, Pete. Okay, the Fed doesn't have any idea really about the cause of the crisis. They kind of see it as again a little bit of irrational exuberance and a lack of adequate regulation. And so they're onto this theme now. So their solution, by the way, is to get more power to the Fed. Okay, they talk about it now in terms of the financial landscape. Oh, now that we have a landscape view instead of some kind of more parochial view, now we can get investment bankers and all those guys somehow under the aegis of an authority of the Fed, and then the Fed will be able to do with all them what they couldn't do with the commercial bankers, what they couldn't do in preventing all of the deregulation and all of that. And it was actually, I don't know, I'll just say pitiful, in my opinion. Now, I didn't listen to Mr. Henig's. I had to leave to come back home, Pete, so I missed his talk on Friday. But I did see that at least he addressed, one of the facts that seemed to be in opposition with his counterparts there, which is he was in favor of breaking up the big banks. Now, to me, in order to do that, there has to be some mechanism for it, and that's what Geithner has been talking about. Well, we need to have that. But if you listen to William Black lately, William Black says they had all the authority they ever needed to prevent, the entire thing from happening, and to put them in their place for what they did.
Paul Krugman was at the conference. Did you hear his talk?
Yeah, I did hear his talk. Pete, all I'm going to say is I was disappointed. I felt like that was Krugman's chance to shine, really. When you're there with, besides the 4 Fed presidents, a couple of the Board of Governors, and not only that, but, there was a tremendous audience. You saw the speakers, but there was a tremendous audience. And for him to have a chance to say, this is what I think we should do in light of, Minsky's hypothesis on financial instability, to use that as the premise for presenting a plan for doing something. And really, I was really disappointed. I'm going to say his plan is a little of this, a little of that, more of this, more of that. It was really disappointing, Pete.
Did you get to ask any pointed questions of the speakers, Joe?
I did, and the fact of the matter is that Mr. Bullard, he was criticized for not preventing the crisis, whereas, I basically asked him, well, hasn't the Fed actually caused these crises, all of them, by the fact that they allowed the deregulation of the financial services to the point where you could have unregulated banks that are too big to fail in themselves, and at the same time, Pete, to cause a threat to commercial banking that is really the cause of all this chaos.
And did you get satisfactory answers to that question?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, he kind of made believe that he didn't understand my question, Pete. He didn't understand my point, and so that basically left him out there not saying anything.
Joe, I got 1 minute left for us here. Did you meet anybody at the lunch table? Did you make any contacts while you were there?
Yeah, Pete, that brings up, one of my more interesting conversations there was with Michael Greenberger, who's a law professor from Maryland, who was the CFTC's chief counsel. That's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission under Brooksley Born. Okay, and he was in charge of trading and derivatives and all of that. And he was, the kind of the primary driver to Brooksley Born to try to regulate the derivatives. So he was that far ahead of everybody else. Brooksley Born took it to the president, took it to Congress. They failed to do it. Clinton now admits that Summers and Rubin were the ones who were most strongly influenced him.
There's a great Frontline show on this very subject.
Yes, there's a great Frontline show, Pete.
From last winter.
Classic, yep. And Michael Greenberger's on there. And Michael Greenberger has also, Pete, a position with the United Nations Commission on Reform of Banking, Finances, and Monetary System. And, I'm hoping to make a connection and try to plead with him along the lines of debt-free money as the solution to a lot of what the problems are.
Well, good summary. You packed a lot into 10 minutes there, Joe.